The desert heat was already building intensity at Fort Braxton as General Marcus Richardson stepped out of his armored vehicle, his polished boots crunching on the gravel path leading to the advanced marksmanship facility. At 53, Richardson carried himself with the bearing of a man who had earned every star on his shoulder through blood, sweat, and an unyielding commitment to excellence. His reputation preceded him wherever he went, a leader who demanded perfection and had never been known to back down from any challenge, no matter how politically sensitive. Today's visit to the 7th Special Operations Training Group was supposed to be routine. Richardson had scheduled an inspection of their new sniper training program, an initiative he had personally championed despite significant resistance from the Pentagon's old guard. The program was controversial not because of its methods or objectives, but because it was one of the first to fully integrate female soldiers into elite sniper training alongside their male counterparts. Colonel James Mitchell, the facility commander, greeted Richardson at the entrance with a crisp salute. Mitchell was a career soldier who had served under Richardson in 3 different deployments, and the general could read the tension in his subordinate's face immediately. Something was bothering Mitchell, and Richardson suspected he knew what it was. "Good morning, General," Mitchell said, falling into step beside Richardson as they walked toward the main training building. "I have the demonstration prepared as you requested, sir. However, I should mention that we've had some interesting developments in the program since your last visit." Richardson raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing Mitchell to continue. The 2 men had worked together long enough that Richardson knew when his colonel was building up to something significant. "Sir, I know you've been following the progress reports, but seeing the actual performance levels might surprise you. Some of our female trainees are exceeding expectations in ways that are challenging some long-held assumptions about combat effectiveness." They entered the main briefing room where a dozen instructors and senior staff members were waiting. Richardson took his seat at the head of the conference table and gestured for the briefing to begin. What he heard over the next 30 minutes would set in motion the events that would fundamentally change his understanding of modern warfare. Staff Sergeant Tony Kowalski, the chief marksmanship instructor, stood before a large display screen showing training statistics and performance metrics. Kowalski was a mountain of a man, a former Marine sniper who had earned his reputation in the mountains of Afghanistan. His voice carried the authority of someone who had seen combat up close and personal. "General, over the past 6 months, we've put 140 soldiers through our advanced sniper program. Of those, 32 were female volunteers from various special operations units. The washout rate for the program overall has been consistent with our projections at roughly 60%. Richardson nodded. These numbers aligned with what he had seen in the monthly reports. The sniper program was designed to be brutally difficult, pushing soldiers beyond their physical and mental limits to identify those with the rare combination of skills necessary for long-range precision warfare. However, sir, Kowalski continued, when we break down the performance data by gender, we're seeing some unexpected patterns. The female soldiers who make it through the initial screening phases are showing completion rates that actually exceed their male counterparts in several key areas." The room fell silent. Richardson could sense the discomfort among some of the staff members, particularly the older veterans who had spent their careers in an era when women were excluded from combat roles entirely. "Explain," Richardson said simply. Kowalski clicked to the next slide, showing detailed marksmanship scores. "Sir, at distances beyond 800 meters, our top female graduates are consistently outperforming male graduates with similar experience levels. More significantly, in high-stress simulation exercises, they're showing superior emotional regulation and decision-making under pressure." Colonel Mitchell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Richardson suspected that his facility commander was struggling with these results, trying to reconcile them with decades of ingrained assumptions about gender and combat effectiveness. "There's more, sir," Kowalski continued. "We've identified one individual whose performance is frankly unprecedented. Sergeant Elena Vasquez, transferred to us from the 75th Ranger Regiment. Her scores are off the charts in every category we measure." Richardson felt a spark of interest. Throughout his career, he had always been drawn to exceptional performers, regardless of their background. Soldiers who exceeded expectations fascinated him, and he had built his reputation by identifying and nurturing such talent. "What makes her so special?" he asked. "Sir, Sergeant Vasquez has achieved qualifying scores on every weapon system in our inventory. But, more importantly, she's demonstrated something we rarely see even in our most experienced operators. She has an intuitive understanding of ballistics that allows her to make rapid adjustments for wind, humidity, and target movement that typically take years of experience to develop. Kowalski paused, looking directly at Richardson. "General, with respect, I've been training snipers for 15 years. I've never seen natural ability like this, male or female." Richardson leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Throughout his career, he had prided himself on being a progressive leader, someone who evaluated soldiers based solely on their capabilities rather than their demographics. But, he also understood the political realities of his position. Every decision he made regarding gender integration was scrutinized by both supporters and detractors. "I want to see her in action," Richardson said finally. "Set up a demonstration." Mitchell cleared his throat. "Sir, that's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. We've arranged for a practical exercise using the Barrett M82 50 caliber system. It's our most challenging weapon platform, and traditionally one where physical size and strength provide significant advantages." Richardson understood the implication immediately. The Barrett M82 was a legendary weapon, weighing nearly 30 pounds and delivering devastating accuracy at extreme ranges. It was also a weapon that had become something of a symbol within the special operations community. Successfully operating the Barrett was considered a rite of passage for elite snipers. "You're telling me that Sergeant Vasquez can handle the Barrett effectively?" Richardson asked. "Sir, she's qualified on it. But, more than that, she's requested to demonstrate advanced techniques that frankly, most of our male operators haven't attempted." The general felt a familiar stirring of competitive interest. Throughout his career, he had made his reputation by taking calculated risks, by supporting soldiers and programs that others dismissed. This situation felt like another such opportunity. "Colonel Mitchell, I want you to arrange a comprehensive demonstration. Full staff attendance. I want to see exactly what Sergeant Vasquez can do with that rifle." "Yes, sir. However, I should mention that some of the staff have expressed concerns about the visibility of such a demonstration. There are questions about whether showcasing a female soldier's performance with such an iconic weapon might send the wrong message." Richardson's expression hardened. "Colonel, the only message I'm interested in sending is that this army evaluates soldiers based on their performance, period. If Sergeant Vasquez has earned her place in this program through merit, then she deserves the opportunity to demonstrate her capabilities." He stood up, signaling the end of the briefing. "Schedule the demonstration for this afternoon. Full range setup, maximum distance targets. And, Colonel?" "Yes, sir?" "Make sure we have adequate documentation. If we're going to challenge assumptions about combat effectiveness, we're going to do it with comprehensive evidence." As the staff filed out of the briefing room, Richardson remained seated, staring at the performance statistics still displayed on the screen. In 30 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts about people and situations. Something about this Sergeant Vasquez intrigued him, and he was eager to see if her performance lived up to the impressive statistics. What Richardson didn't know was that the afternoon's demonstration would challenge not just his assumptions about gender and combat, but his fundamental understanding of what made a truly exceptional soldier. The small details, a tiny metal pin on a uniform, a moment of hesitation, a flash of recognition, would combine to create an experience that would stay with him for the rest of his career. Outside the briefing room, Staff Sergeant Kowalski was already making preparations for the demonstration. He had worked with enough high-ranking officers to understand the political implications of what they were about to do. Showcasing a female soldier's exceptional marksmanship skills was guaranteed to generate attention, both positive and negative. But Kowalski also understood something that many of his colleagues were still learning: the nature of warfare was changing, and the traditional assumptions about who could excel in combat were being challenged by reality. Sergeant Elena Vasquez represented something new, something that forced everyone who worked with her to reconsider their preconceptions about strength, skill, and what it meant to be a warrior. The stage was set for a demonstration that would prove far more significant than anyone anticipated. In a few hours, General Richardson would find himself holding his legendary Barrett rifle, preparing to hand it to a soldier who would fundamentally change his understanding of leadership, courage, and the evolving nature of modern military service. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as General Richardson made his way to the long-range firing facility, a state-of-the-art complex that stretched across 2 miles of carefully maintained desert terrain. The facility represented millions of dollars in military investment, designed to simulate the most challenging combat environments that modern snipers might encounter in global operations. Richardson carried his personal Barrett M82A1 rifle case, a weapon that had become legendary among those who knew its history. The rifle had been with him through 3 combat deployments, customized over years of use until it was perfectly tailored to his shooting style and preferences. The weapon represented more than just equipment to Richardson, it was a symbol of his expertise, his credibility as a combat leader who had earned respect through demonstrated skill rather than just rank. Colonel Mitchell was waiting at the firing line along with a gathering crowd of instructors, training staff, and senior non-commissioned officers. Word of the demonstration had spread quickly through the facility, and Richardson could sense the mixture of curiosity and skepticism that permeated the group. Many of these men had served their entire careers in a military where certain assumptions about gender and combat effectiveness were rarely questioned. "General, we've set up targets at 4 different ranges," Mitchell reported. 800 meters, 1,200 meters, 1,500 meters, and our maximum range target at 1,800 meters. Weather conditions are optimal with minimal wind variance. Richardson nodded, setting down his rifle case and beginning the familiar ritual of weapon preparation. The Barrett M82A1 was an imposing piece of equipment, stretching nearly 4 feet in length and weighing 28 pounds when fully loaded with its 10-round magazine. The rifle's .50 caliber rounds were massive, each cartridge nearly 6 inches long and capable of delivering devastating accuracy at extreme distances. As Richardson began assembling his rifle, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. His own sniper training had taken place nearly 25 years earlier, during an era when the idea of women in combat roles was not even considered. He had earned his reputation through countless hours of practice, developing the skills and instincts that had made him one of the Army's most respected marksmen. "Sir, Sergeant Vasquez is completing her equipment check," Staff Sergeant Kowalski reported. "She'll be ready to begin the demonstration in approximately 10 minutes. Richardson looked across the firing line to where a figure was methodically preparing her own weapon system. From this distance, he could see little more than a silhouette, but there was something about the soldier's movements that caught his attention. Every motion was precise, economical, demonstrating the kind of unconscious competence that came only from extensive experience. "Tell me about her background," Richardson said to Mitchell. "How did she end up in this program?" Mitchell consulted his tablet, pulling up Sergeant Vasquez's personnel file. Elena Vasquez, 26 years old, born in El Paso, Texas. Enlisted in the Army at 18, initially trained as a communications specialist. Volunteered for Ranger training 3 years ago and completed the program with distinction. She was one of the first female soldiers to graduate from Ranger School. Richardson continued working on his rifle, but he was listening intently. The Ranger program was notoriously difficult, with failure rates that often exceeded 80%. Any soldier who completed it had proven their physical and mental toughness beyond question. After Ranger School, she was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment where she participated in multiple overseas deployments, Mitchell continued. Her commanding officers noted her exceptional marksmanship abilities and recommended her for advanced sniper training. She's been in our program for 4 months and has consistently ranked in the top 5% of all participants. Richardson secured the final component of his rifle and stood up, checking the weapon's balance and feel. The Barrett was perfectly familiar to him, an extension of his own capabilities that he could operate with unconscious precision. "General, if I may," Kowalski interjected. "There's something else about Sergeant Vasquez that makes her unusual. She has a background in competitive shooting that predates her military service. Her father was apparently a longtime shooting competitor, and she grew up around firearms." This information added another layer to Richardson's understanding. Military marksmanship training was excellent, but soldiers who came into the service with prior shooting experience often demonstrated capabilities that exceeded even the most intensive military programs. "Competitive in what disciplines?" Richardson asked. "Long-range precision rifle, sir." She was apparently quite successful at the regional level before enlisting. According to her records, she holds several state championship titles in her age group. Richardson felt a growing sense of anticipation. Throughout his career, he had encountered a handful of soldiers whose natural abilities exceeded normal expectations. These individuals were rare, but, when identified and properly developed, they could become truly exceptional operators. A movement across the firing line caught his attention, and Richardson looked up to see Sergeant Vasquez approaching with her rifle. His first impression was of someone significantly smaller than he had expected. Vasquez stood perhaps 5 feet 6 inches tall with a compact, athletic build that seemed almost delicate compared to the massive weapon she carried. But, as she drew closer, Richardson began to notice details that told a different story. Her movements were fluid and confident, showing no sign of being burdened by the weight of her equipment. More significantly, the way she handled her rifle demonstrated a level of familiarity that impressed even Richardson's experienced eye. "Sergeant Vasquez reporting for the demonstration, sir," she said, coming to attention before Richardson. Her voice was calm and professional, showing no signs of nervousness despite the crowd of senior officers and instructors who had gathered to observe her performance. Richardson studied her face, noting the focused intensity in her dark eyes and the controlled composure that suggested someone comfortable with pressure situations. "At ease, Sergeant," Richardson replied. "I understand you're going to show us what you can do with the Barrett system." "Yes, sir. I'm prepared to engage targets at all designated ranges with both standard and advanced techniques, depending on your preferences." Richardson was struck by her confidence. Not arrogance or bravado, but the quiet self-assurance of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of accomplishing. "Before we begin," Richardson said, "I'd like to understand your approach to long-range marksmanship. What do you consider the most critical factors for success at extreme distances?" Vasquez paused for a moment, clearly organizing her thoughts before responding. "Sir, in my experience, the technical aspects of marksmanship, sight picture, trigger control, breathing, are fundamental but relatively straightforward to master with sufficient practice. The real challenges at extreme range are environmental reading and psychological management." Richardson raised an eyebrow. This was not the kind of response he typically heard from soldiers with only 4 months of advanced training. "Elaborate," he said. "Environmental conditions change constantly throughout an engagement, sir. Wind speed and direction, humidity, barometric pressure, even the angle of sunlight can affect bullet trajectory in ways that standard ballistic tables don't always account for. The ability to read these conditions accurately and make real-time adjustments is what separates adequate snipers from exceptional ones." She paused, then continued. "But equally important is psychological management. At extreme ranges, the time between trigger pull and target impact can be several seconds. During that time, doubt can creep in. Second-guessing your calculations, your environmental reads, your equipment settings. The most technically proficient marksmen in the world will miss consistently if they can't maintain psychological discipline throughout the engagement sequence." Richardson found himself impressed despite his initial skepticism. Vasquez's analysis demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of marksmanship theory that typically took years of experience to develop. "Interesting perspective," he said. "Are you ready to demonstrate these principles?" "Yes, sir. I've prepared several different shooting scenarios that showcase different aspects of long-range precision. With your permission, I'd like to begin with standard engagement techniques and progress to more advanced applications." Richardson nodded and gestured toward the firing line. "Sergeant, the range is yours." As Vasquez moved to her firing position, Richardson found himself studying her technique with the critical eye of an expert. Every movement was economical and purposeful, suggesting countless hours of practice and refinement. She settled into her shooting position with a fluidity that impressed even the veteran instructors who had gathered to observe. But what struck Richardson most was not her technical proficiency, impressive as it was. Instead, he was drawn to something intangible, an aura of quiet competence that seemed to surround her as she prepared for the demonstration. In 30 years of military service, Richardson had learned to recognize exceptional soldiers, and something about Sergeant Vasquez triggered every instinct he had developed for identifying outstanding talent. The targets were arranged at graduated distances across the desert landscape, each one positioned to present different challenges and test different aspects of marksmanship skill. The closest target at 800 meters was relatively straightforward, well within the effective range of most experienced marksmen. But the targets at 1500 and 1800 meters represented shots that challenged even the most skilled operators. Richardson took his position beside Vasquez, his own Barrett rifle ready for his part of the demonstration. The plan was for both of them to engage the same target sequence, allowing for direct comparison of their techniques and results. "Sergeant, begin when ready," Richardson announced. What happened next would exceed everyone's expectations and force Richardson to confront assumptions he had carried throughout his career. But, more significantly, a small detail, something that seemed insignificant to most observers, would capture his attention and trigger a moment of recognition that would change everything he thought he understood about the soldier beside him. The first shot rang out across the desert with the distinctive crack of the Barrett's massive .50 caliber round breaking the sound barrier. Sergeant Vasquez had engaged the 800-meter target with what appeared to be casual precision, her rifle barely seeming to move despite the weapon's formidable recoil. Through his spotting scope, Richardson watched the target downrange and felt his first stirring of genuine surprise. The shot had struck dead center, creating a precise hole in the target's bullseye ring. For most marksmen, achieving such accuracy at 800 meters required careful preparation and multiple ranging shots. Vasquez had done it on her first attempt. "Clean hit, center mass," called out Sergeant Major Williams, the range safety officer who was monitoring target impacts through high-powered optics. "Perfect score on target 1. Richardson lowered his spotting scope and looked at Vasquez, who was already preparing for her next shot without any visible reaction to the praise. Her focus remained entirely on her weapon and the next target in the sequence, demonstrating the kind of professional detachment that Richardson associated with veteran combat operators. "Engaging target 2, Vasquez announced calmly. The second target was positioned at 1,200 meters, a distance that began to challenge even experienced snipers. At this range, environmental factors became significantly more important, and the margin for error decreased dramatically. Richardson watched as Vasquez made subtle adjustments to her scope settings, her movements precise and confident. The second shot followed moments later, and Richardson immediately trained his spotting scope on the distant target. Another perfect hit, striking within inches of the target center. Around him, he could hear murmurs of approval from the assembled instructors and staff members. "Outstanding shooting, Sergeant," Colonel Mitchell commented. "Ready to proceed to the 1,500-meter target?" Vasquez nodded, beginning the more complex calculations required for extreme-range engagement. Richardson found himself studying her technique with growing fascination. Every aspect of her performance demonstrated a level of sophistication that typically required years of experience to develop. But, as Vasquez prepared for her third shot, Richardson noticed something that made him pause. Pinned to her uniform, just above her left breast pocket, was a small metal insignia that he hadn't paid attention to before. As his eyes focused on the pin, Richardson felt a sudden jolt of recognition that sent a chill down his spine. The insignia was a sniper qualification badge, but not just any sniper badge. This was the distinctive pin awarded only to graduates of the Army's most elite sniper program, a course so difficult that fewer than 20 soldiers per year successfully completed it. But what froze Richardson in place was not just the badge itself, but the specific design variant that Vasquez wore. The pin featured a small diamond-shaped attachment that Richardson recognized immediately. It was the designation for a sniper who had achieved combat kills at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. In the entire United States Army, fewer than 50 living soldiers wore that particular combination of insignia. Richardson's mind raced as he processed this information. Sergeant Vasquez was not just a talented trainee or even an exceptional graduate of their advanced program. She was already a proven combat sniper with confirmed long-range kills in actual warfare. The demonstration he was witnessing was not a test of potential, it was a display of capabilities that had already been proven under the most demanding conditions possible. "General, are you all right?" Colonel Mitchell asked, noticing Richardson's sudden stillness. Richardson shook his head slightly, refocusing on the moment. "Continue the demonstration," he said quietly. Vasquez had completed her preparations for the 1,500-meter shot, a distance that challenged the limits of the Barrett system under ideal conditions. Richardson watched as she settled into her final shooting position, her breathing becoming slow and controlled as she prepared for the most difficult shot of the sequence. The rifle fired, its report echoing across the desert landscape. Through his spotting scope, Richardson tracked the bullet's flight path until it struck the distant target with devastating precision. Another perfect hit, demonstrating marksmanship that exceeded anything he had seen outside of actual combat operations. "Incredible," Staff Sergeant Kowalski muttered. "I've never seen shooting like that in a training environment." But Richardson was no longer focused on the technical aspects of Vasquez's marksmanship. His mind was consumed by questions about her background and experience. How had a sergeant with such exceptional capabilities ended up in their training program? Why hadn't her previous combat experience been emphasized in her personnel files? "Sergeant Vasquez," Richardson called out. "Before you engage the final target, I'd like to ask you about your previous experience." Vasquez lowered her rifle and turned toward Richardson, her expression remaining professionally neutral. "What would you like to know, sir?" Your sniper qualification badge indicates combat experience. Can you tell me about your operational background? For the first time during the demonstration, Vasquez seemed to hesitate. Richardson could see something shift in her expression, a brief moment of uncertainty that suggested she was unsure how much detail to provide. Sir, I participated in 3 combat deployments with the 75th Ranger Regiment. During those deployments, I served as a designated marksman and participated in various special operations missions. Richardson studied her face, recognizing the careful language that soldiers used when discussing classified operations. Sergeant, that insignia you're wearing indicates confirmed kills at extreme range. How many combat engagements have you participated in as a sniper? Another pause. Sir, I have 17 confirmed kills at ranges between 800 and 1400 meters, achieved during operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. The number hit Richardson like a physical blow. 17 confirmed kills placed Vasquez among the most experienced combat snipers in the entire military. By comparison, many snipers completed entire careers without achieving half that number of confirmed long-range eliminations. Around him, Richardson could sense the impact of this revelation on the assembled staff. The demonstration had transformed from a showcase of training program effectiveness to something entirely different, a display of combat-proven expertise that challenged every assumption they had made about the soldier before them. Sergeant, Richardson said carefully, given your extensive combat experience, what brings you to our training program? Sir, I requested assignment to this facility to develop skills as an instructor. My goal is to transition from operational duties to training the next generation of Army snipers. Richardson felt pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Vasquez wasn't here as a student, she was here as a future instructor whose own experience exceeded that of many of the current training staff. The demonstration he had requested was not a test of her abilities, but rather an opportunity for her to showcase capabilities that qualified her to teach others. I see, Richardson said slowly. Colonel Mitchell, were you aware of Sergeant Vasquez's operational background when we planned this demonstration? Mitchell's uncomfortable expression provided its own answer. Sir, I was aware that she had combat experience, but I may not have fully understood the extent of her operational history. Richardson turned back to Vasquez, who was waiting patiently for permission to continue the demonstration. The final target at 1800 meters represented a shot at the absolute limits of the Barrett system's effective range. Under ideal conditions, with perfect equipment and flawless technique, such a shot was theoretically possible. In practice, very few snipers ever attempted it outside of controlled testing environments. Sergeant, the final target is at maximum range. Are you confident in your ability to engage effectively at that distance? Sir, I've made successful shots at similar ranges during combat operations. Environmental conditions today are favorable, and I believe I can achieve a successful hit. Richardson found himself in an unexpected position. What had begun as a demonstration to evaluate a training program had evolved into something much more significant. He was witnessing capabilities that challenged not just his assumptions about gender and combat effectiveness, but his understanding of what constituted exceptional performance under any circumstances. Proceed with the final engagement, Richardson ordered. As Vasquez prepared for her most challenging shot, Richardson reflected on the implications of what he was witnessing. Throughout his career, he had prided himself on recognizing and developing exceptional talent. But the soldier beside him represented something beyond his previous experience, a level of proven combat effectiveness that demanded a fundamental reassessment of his leadership approach. The question was no longer whether Vasquez could perform at elite levels. Her record spoke for itself. The real question was how Richardson would adapt his own thinking to accommodate the reality of what she represented for the future of military operations. The final shot was only moments away, and Richardson knew that regardless of the outcome, this demonstration had already changed something fundamental about his understanding of modern warfare and the soldiers who would define its future. The 1800-meter target seemed impossibly distant through Richardson's spotting scope, a small speck against the desert backdrop that wavered in the heat shimmer rising from the sun-baked ground. At this range, the bullet would travel for nearly 3 seconds before impact, requiring calculations that accounted for bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric pressure, and even the rotation of the Earth itself. Sergeant Vasquez had been motionless for several minutes, studying the target through her rifle scope while making minute adjustments to her position and equipment. Richardson watched her preparation with growing admiration, recognizing the methodical approach of a sniper who understood that success at extreme range required patience and precision in equal measure. Wind reading shows variable conditions between here and target, announced the range meteorologist, Staff Sergeant Chen. Estimated wind speed of 8 to 12 miles per hour with directional shifts approximately every 30 seconds. These were challenging conditions that would test even the most experienced marksman. At 1800 meters, a wind miscalculation of just a few miles per hour could result in a miss by several feet. Richardson had attempted similar shots under comparable conditions and knew firsthand how difficult they could be. Understood, Vasquez replied calmly, continuing her preparations without any sign of concern about the challenging environmental factors. Richardson found himself studying not just her shooting technique, but her entire approach to the shot. There was something almost meditative about her preparation, a level of focus and concentration that seemed to exclude everything except the immediate demands of the engagement. He had seen similar behavior among elite special operations soldiers, but rarely to this degree. General, Colonel Mitchell said quietly, regardless of whether she hits this target, her performance today has been extraordinary. I've never seen marksmanship of this caliber in a training environment. Richardson nodded but remained focused on Vasquez. Something about her approach to this final shot had captured his complete attention. The way she moved, the rhythm of her breathing, even the subtle adjustments she made to her rifle position all suggested someone operating at the absolute peak of their capabilities. Ready, Vasquez announced. The range fell silent. Richardson trained his spotting scope on the distant target, knowing that at this range, he would need to track the bullet's flight path carefully to determine the point of impact. Around him, every instructor and staff member was focused intently on what was about to unfold. The Barrett fired with its characteristic thunderous report, the massive rifle jumping against Vasquez's shoulder despite her expert technique. Richardson followed the bullet's trajectory through his scope, watching for the telltale puff of dust that would mark the impact point. For what seemed like an eternity, nothing happened. Then, almost impossibly distant, Richardson saw the target shudder slightly. Through his scope, he could see a clean hole punched through the center ring of the target, another perfect hit that demonstrated marksmanship beyond anything he had witnessed in 30 years of military service. Direct hit, dead center, Sergeant Major Williams called out, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. Perfect score on all 4 targets. The range erupted in spontaneous applause from the assembled staff. Richardson lowered his spotting scope and looked at Vasquez, who was already beginning to clear her weapon with the same methodical precision she had shown throughout the demonstration. But, as the celebration continued around him, Richardson found himself grappling with emotions and thoughts that went far beyond simple admiration for exceptional marksmanship. The small sniper pin on Vasquez's uniform had triggered a cascade of realizations that were forcing him to confront fundamental assumptions about leadership, capability, and his own role as a senior military officer. Sergeant Vasquez, Richardson said, raising his voice to cut through the congratulatory noise. Outstanding performance. Please join me for a private discussion. Richardson led Vasquez away from the crowd to a quiet area adjacent to the firing line. As they walked, he found himself studying her profile, trying to reconcile the compact, unassuming figure beside him with the extraordinary capabilities she had just demonstrated. Sergeant, I owe you an apology, Richardson began. When I arrived here this morning, I came with certain expectations about what I would see. Your performance has forced me to confront some assumptions I didn't even realize I was making. Vasquez looked slightly puzzled. Sir, I'm not sure I understand. Richardson gestured toward her sniper qualification badge. That insignia you're wearing tells a story that wasn't adequately reflected in your personnel file. 17 confirmed kills represents a level of combat experience that places you among the Army's most elite operators. Yet you were introduced to me as a training program participant. Sir, I requested assignment to this facility specifically to develop my skills as an instructor. My combat experience is in my service record, but my focus now is on transitioning to a training role. Richardson nodded, understanding the careful navigation that soldiers like Vasquez had to manage when transitioning between operational and instructional duties. But something else was bothering him, a nagging sense that there were layers to her story that he still didn't fully comprehend. Sergeant, help me understand something. In my experience, soldiers with your level of combat effectiveness typically pursue advanced leadership positions or specialized roles within special operations units. What motivated you to seek a training assignment? For the first time during their interaction, Vasquez seemed to consider her words carefully before responding. Richardson could see something shift in her expression, a moment of vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the professional composure she had maintained throughout the demonstration. "Sir, during my last deployment, our unit lost 2 soldiers who were killed by enemy snipers. Both deaths occurred during situations where better training might have made a difference. The soldiers we lost were good men, but they hadn't received the kind of advanced marksmanship instruction that could have saved their lives." She paused, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains beyond the firing range. "I realized that I could probably save more lives by training soldiers than by continuing in an operational role. Teaching others to survive combat seemed more important than adding to my own operational record." The simple honesty of her response hit Richardson with unexpected force. Throughout his career, he had encountered many exceptional soldiers, but few who demonstrated such clear perspective about the larger purpose of their service. "That's a remarkably mature perspective for someone your age," Richardson said. "How old are you, Sergeant?" 26, sir." Richardson felt another shock of realization. At 26, Vasquez had already accomplished more in combat than many soldiers achieved in entire careers. More significantly, she was making career decisions based on a sophisticated understanding of how her skills could best serve the broader mission of military readiness. "Sergeant, I have one more question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you believe that gender has been a factor in how your capabilities have been perceived or utilized by the Army?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing how to respond to such a direct question from a general officer. "Sir, I believe that some people have been surprised by my performance, but I've been fortunate to serve with leaders who evaluated me based on results rather than preconceptions. The Army has given me opportunities to prove myself, and I've tried to make the most of those opportunities." Richardson recognized the diplomatic nature of her response, but he also heard the underlying message. Vasquez had undoubtedly faced skepticism and challenges related to gender throughout her career, but she had chosen to focus on performance rather than politics. "Sergeant, I'm going to make some changes based on what I've witnessed here today. First, I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to Staff Sergeant. Second, I'm requesting that you be assigned as the primary instructor for our advanced marksmanship program." Vasquez's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but there are instructors here with more experience and seniority." "Experience in what?" Richardson challenged. "Training theoretical scenarios or surviving actual combat engagements?" "Sergeant, you have something that can't be taught in a classroom. You have credibility that comes from proven performance under the most demanding conditions possible." Richardson could see Vasquez processing this information, understanding the implications of what he was proposing. "There's something else," Richardson continued. "I'm also recommending you for assignment to our instructor development program. Within 2 years, I want you prepared to take over as the senior enlisted leader for this entire facility." The magnitude of what Richardson was suggesting was evident in Vasquez's expression. Such rapid advancement was virtually unprecedented, especially for someone her age and rank. "Sir, that would represent a significant departure from normal career progression." Richardson smiled. "Sergeant, nothing about your career has been normal. Why should we expect your advancement to follow conventional patterns?" As they walked back toward the crowd of instructors and staff members, Richardson found himself reflecting on the broader implications of the afternoon's events. The demonstration had begun as a routine inspection but had evolved into something that challenged his fundamental understanding of modern military leadership. The small sniper pin that had initially captured his attention had become a symbol of something much larger, a reminder that exceptional capability could exist in forms that didn't always match traditional expectations. More importantly, it had forced him to confront the possibility that his own preconceptions might be limiting his effectiveness as a leader. The changes Richardson was about to implement would extend far beyond Sergeant Vasquez's career. They would signal a new approach to identifying and developing talent, one that prioritized demonstrated capability over conventional assumptions about who could excel in combat roles. As they rejoined the group, Richardson knew that word of the demonstration would spread quickly throughout the military community. The story of a general who handed his legendary rifle to a female soldier and witnessed performance that exceeded his own capabilities would become part of military folklore. But, for Richardson, the real significance of the day lay in a more personal realization. After 30 years of military service, he had discovered that true leadership meant being willing to have his assumptions challenged and changed by the exceptional soldiers he was privileged to command. 2 years later, General Richardson stood once again at the Fort Braxton marksmanship facility, but the scene before him bore little resemblance to the place he had visited on that transformative afternoon. The facility had been expanded significantly, with new training ranges, advanced simulation equipment, and classroom facilities that reflected its elevated status within the military training community. More importantly, the program itself had evolved into something that exceeded Richardson's most optimistic projections. Under the leadership of now Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, the Advanced Sniper Training Program had become the most sought-after assignment for precision marksmen throughout the armed forces. Graduates of the program were setting new standards for marksmanship excellence across all branches of military service. Richardson walked through the main classroom building, observing training sessions that demonstrated the innovative approaches Vasquez had implemented. Traditional gender-segregated training had been eliminated, replaced by integrated programs that evaluated soldiers purely on demonstrated capability. The results spoke for themselves: graduation rates had improved, performance standards had increased, and the program was producing snipers whose combat effectiveness exceeded anything achieved by previous training methods. "General Richardson, welcome back to the facility," Staff Sergeant Vasquez said, approaching with the confident bearing of someone who had grown comfortably into positions of greater responsibility. Richardson smiled, noting the additional insignia on Vasquez's uniform that reflected her expanded role and achievements. In addition to her original sniper qualification badge, she now wore instructor credentials and commendation ribbons that told the story of her remarkable career progression. "Staff Sergeant, it's good to see you again. I'm here for the graduation ceremony, but I also wanted to get a personal update on how the program has developed. Sir, we're graduating 42 students this cycle, representing the largest class in the program's history. More significantly, we're seeing performance improvements across all measured categories compared to historical benchmarks." As they walked through the facility, Vasquez provided Richardson with a comprehensive briefing on the changes that had been implemented. The traditional approach of separating students by gender had been replaced with skill-based groupings that allowed soldiers to train alongside others at similar capability levels regardless of demographics. The result was a more competitive environment that pushed all participants to achieve their maximum potential. "We've also implemented mentorship programs that pair experienced combat veterans with newer students," Vasquez explained. "This allows us to transfer not just technical skills, but the kind of tactical knowledge that can only come from actual operational experience." Richardson found himself impressed by the sophistication of Vasquez's approach to program development. The changes she had implemented went far beyond simple modifications to existing training protocols. Instead, she had fundamentally reimagined how elite military skills could be taught and developed. "What kind of feedback are you receiving from units that have deployed with your graduates?" Richardson asked. "Sir, the reports have been consistently positive. Our graduates are performing at levels that exceed expectations, and, more importantly, they're serving as force multipliers by training other soldiers in their assigned units." They entered the main training range where students were conducting live-fire exercises under Vasquez's supervision. Richardson observed the training with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating military effectiveness. What he saw confirmed the statistical reports he had been receiving. These soldiers were demonstrating marksmanship capabilities that represented a new standard for military precision shooting. But, beyond the technical proficiency, Richardson noticed something equally important. The soldiers in training displayed the kind of confidence and professional bearing that came from knowing they were receiving instruction from someone with unquestionable credibility. Vasquez's combat experience gave weight to every lesson she taught, creating an environment where students understood they were learning skills that could save their lives in actual combat. "Staff Sergeant, I have some news that I wanted to share with you personally," Richardson said as they moved away from the training area. "Your promotion to Sergeant First Class has been approved, along with your selection for the Sergeant Major Academy." Vasquez stopped walking, clearly surprised by the announcement. "Sir, that represents a significant acceleration of normal career progression." "Staff Sergeant, nothing about your career has followed normal progression. The Army has invested heavily in this program based on the results you've achieved. We want to ensure you have the leadership development necessary to continue advancing to positions of greater responsibility." Richardson could see Vasquez processing the implications of this advancement. Selection for the Sergeant Major Academy was reserved for the Army's most promising non-commissioned officers, typically those with much more time and service than her current experience level. "Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm concerned about leaving the program during such a critical development phase." "You won't be leaving," Richardson replied. The Academy has agreed to a modified program that will allow you to complete your leadership development while maintaining your current role. This is unprecedented, but your situation is unprecedented. They continued walking until they reached Richardson's original destination, the memorial wall that had been erected to honor graduates of the program who had made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country. The wall displayed photographs and brief biographies of soldiers whose training at Fort Braxton had prepared them for the missions that cost them their lives. "This is why the program matters," Vasquez said quietly, studying the photographs. "Every soldier we train properly is someone who might survive situations that would otherwise be fatal." Richardson nodded, understanding the deeper motivation that drove Vasquez's commitment to excellence in training. Her decision to transition from operational duties to instruction had been based on a clear understanding that superior training could save lives in ways that individual combat performance could not match. "Staff Sergeant, I want to discuss something with you that goes beyond program development. I'm being considered for promotion to Lieutenant General, with assignment to oversee training doctrine for the entire Army. If that happens, I want you to consider a position on my staff." The magnitude of what Richardson was suggesting was evident in Vasquez's expression. Such an assignment would place her at the center of military training policy development, with influence that extended far beyond any individual program or facility. "Sir, that would be an extraordinary opportunity, but I'm not sure I have the qualifications for such a position." "Staff Sergeant, you have something more valuable than traditional qualifications. You have demonstrated results that speak for themselves. The innovations you've implemented here need to be scaled across the entire training enterprise." Richardson could see Vasquez weighing the opportunity against her sense of responsibility to the current program. Throughout their association, he had come to understand that she approached every decision through the lens of how it would impact the soldiers she was responsible for developing. "I would want to ensure that the program here continues to operate at current standards," she said finally. "That's exactly the kind of thinking I want involved in Army-wide policy development," Richardson replied. "Staff Sergeant, you've proven that innovative approaches to training can produce superior results. The question is whether you're ready to help implement those approaches across the entire military." As they prepared to leave the memorial wall, Richardson reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun with a single demonstration of exceptional marksmanship had evolved into a fundamental transformation of how the Army approached elite training. The small sniper pin that had first caught his attention had become the symbol of a new understanding about capability and potential. The graduation ceremony that evening would mark another milestone in the program's development, but Richardson knew that the real significance lay in the broader changes that were taking place throughout the military. The soldiers being trained at Fort Braxton would carry new standards of excellence to units around the world, raising the performance levels of everyone they served with. Most importantly, the program had become proof that exceptional capability could emerge from unexpected sources when given proper opportunities for development. The lessons learned at Fort Braxton were being studied and replicated throughout the military, creating a legacy that would influence training doctrine for generations to come. As Richardson prepared to leave the facility, he carried with him a sense of satisfaction that went beyond simple professional achievement. The changes he had initiated based on a single afternoon's observation had created lasting improvements in military readiness and effectiveness. But, perhaps more significantly, they had demonstrated the importance of remaining open to having fundamental assumptions challenged by the exceptional soldiers he was privileged to lead. The small metal pin that had frozen him in recognition 2 years earlier had become the catalyst for changes that would define his legacy as a military leader. In learning to see beyond his own preconceptions, Richardson had discovered new possibilities for military excellence that would continue to influence training and development long after his own retirement. The story that had begun with a general's decision to hand his legendary rifle to an unexpected soldier had become a testament to the power of recognizing and developing exceptional talent wherever it might be found. For Richardson, it represented the most important lesson of his military career, that true leadership meant being willing to have his understanding of excellence continuously expanded by the remarkable soldiers he was honored to serve alongside.